games children play may not be the same in different parts of the world, but the spirit of childhood is universal and unchanging. The end of schooling is not the end of learning. Knowledge of the ages is available to all. Sooner or later, everyone comes to the library.
Following the end of World War II, libraries would be seen as essential to shaping post-war American culture. UNESCO Director Julian Huxley would write of the importance of libraries in advancing UNESCO's cultural agenda. Central to the control of information provided by libraries is the American Library Association, the oldest and largest library association in the world. Originally formed in 1876, the ALA was initially an organization of WASP elites who sought to elevate society through the promotion of classic, uplifting, high-quality literature to the masses. By the mid-20th century, however, the Jewish domination of the ALA became increasingly apparent, with the most subversive and obscene material being promoted under the guise of intellectual freedom. In response to the public burnings of Jewish pornography and sex propaganda in National Socialist Germany, intellectual freedom activists within the American Library Association would bring about the adoption of the Library Bill of Rights in 1939, and the creation of an Intellectual Freedom Committee a year later, redefining the American Library as an institution with a responsibility to oppose censorship of any kind, and to promote materials regardless of their cultural value. In 1953, the ALA Intellectual Freedom Committee, headed by William Dix, and the American Book Publishers Council, representing the interests of a publishing industry completely dominated by Jews, would join together in the Freedom to Read Conference, chaired by UNESCO. The conference would focus specifically on issues of obscenity, pornography, and other subversive materials, and will result in the Freedom to Read Statement, written mostly by William Dix, who would specify that libraries and book publishers should not hinder the spread of obscenity in any way, and should not attempt to uphold any cultural or moral standards. As a result of this new approach, American libraries would quickly transform from uplifters of culture into pornography distribution centers. William Dix's intellectual freedom work would earn him a position at UNESCO in 1955, and in 1969 he would become president of the American Library Association. During his tenure as president, Dix would oversee the complete takeover of the ALA by the Jewish New Left. Following the lead of the Jewish Frankfurt School, the New Left that emerged in the 1960s rejected the Old Left's focus on labor issues, and instead embraced the cultural approach, including the aggressive enforcement of the top-down imposed sexual revolution.
In Greenwich Village, a play about Che Guevara, the dead Cuban guerrilla leader, was one of the first to take advantage of the new moral and sexual climate.
Do you see yourself as offering some revolutionary message in the theater?
Bang, bang. Definitely. I feel we're pioneers in American theater.
What is it you're pioneering? What are you wanting to say?
The sexual revolution. I feel we're going into the, beginning of an emotional revolution, because our play is not just a nude play or a sexual play, or it's we don't just take our clothes off and say, "Look, I am nude." It's all very natural.
While making up only 3% of the American population, Jews constituted between 1/3 and 1/2 of the New Left activists on college campuses across the country, and were a majority of the movement's most active members.
The 4th, 3rd, and 2nd floors are filled. Stay downstairs.
The Bay Area Civil Rights Movement in the stairwell over there.
Jewish New Left leaders like Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin would place sex at the center of their politics, and this did not always include consensual sex. Among the celebrated figures of the New Left were proud child-raping Jews Allen Ginsberg and Paul Goodman.
And poet Allen Ginsberg, who now marches in peace demonstrations, voiced much of the discontent with middle-class values 10 years ago in his poem, Howl.
Moloch, Moloch, nightmare of Moloch. Moloch whose love is endless oil and stone.
As well as Black Panther icon and convicted serial rapist Eldridge Cleaver, who believed raping white women was an insurrectionary act. In the book Do It, which features an introduction by Cleaver, Jerry Rubin writes of the importance of revolutionary sex politics, and ends the passage with the following.
Our tactic is to send niggers and long-hair scum invading white middle-class homes, fucking on the living room floor, crashing on the chandeliers, spewing sperm on the Jesus pictures, breaking the furniture, and smashing Sunday school napalm blood America forever.
The New Left had inherited their sex rhetoric from Jewish Frankfurt School critical theorist Herbert Marcuse, considered to be the father of the New Left.
We are dealing with the dialectic of liberation.
After spending a decade in the OSS and the U.S. State Department, Marcuse would emerge in the 1960s as the guru to the so-called anti-establishment American New Left, bringing the sexual revolution of Wilhelm Reich to a new generation and its most radical proponents yet.
I believe that the fight is just beginning to start. The fight against these powers must go on because it is a fight for you.
Just as decades earlier, his Frankfurt School colleagues had concluded the authoritarian personality by identifying a focus on Eros as a necessity for democracy. In the preface to the 1966 edition of Eros and Civilization, Marcuse would write that the fight for Eros was the political fight of the day. Like Wilhelm Reich before him, Marcuse placed societal blame on what he viewed as the repression of child sexuality inherent in the traditional family upbringing. It would call for children to instead be raised in a culture of polymorphous sexuality, in which the performance principle would be replaced by the pleasure principle, and all obligation of civilization replaced by the hedonistic pursuit of erotic pleasure. Marcuse would call on his New Left to establish an educational dictatorship in order to bring about this cultural revolution. As the New Left conquered the American Library Association in the late 60s, it would construct its own organizations within the ALA system. 1969 saw the official formation of the Roundtable on the Social Responsibilities of Libraries, later renamed the Social Responsibilities Roundtable, with the purpose of holding the ALA to what the Roundtable believed was its institutional responsibility of enacting leftist social policy. The Social Responsibilities Roundtable would quickly form several organizations reflecting the New Left's commitment to the sexual revolution, including the Task Force on Gay Liberation, founded in 1970 by gay Orthodox Jew Israel Fishman.
So why couldn't they find a way for us? What's so difficult? I mean, I'm sure if rabbis sat down with Talmudic head, they would find a way. For gay people, for queers.
And the Task Force on Sex-Related Media in 1971. The Task Force on Sex-Related Media would immediately set out to establish basic lists of sex-related media, which should be held by all libraries, support the establishment of sexual adventure sections in libraries, and coordinate with children's sex education organizations such as SIECUS, as well as various homophile organizations and sexual offenders in prison, in order to promote their child sex propaganda through the library system. Israel Fishman's Task Force on Gay Liberation would successfully lobby the Library of Congress and libraries across the country to change their classification systems in order to normalize homosexuality. At the 1971 annual ALA conference, the task force would set up a Hug a Homosexual booth, offering gay hugs and kisses to the conference participants, in the hopes of encouraging people to be less afraid to express affection towards others of their own sex. In 1975, the task force would begin to release guidelines for treatment of gay themes in children's and young adult literature, instructing librarians to select content which promotes gay identity as a valid life choice for children, including illustrations of gay couples as parents and as older brothers and sisters dating kids of the same sex, and explicit physical portrayals of gay relationships between teenagers, all with the purpose of selling the homosexual lifestyle to children who are, quote, teetering on the fence between gay and straight. The Gay Task Force would also regularly release guides on how to get gay materials into libraries and schools. In the face of backlash from the American public over the radical policies emanating from its social responsibilities wing, the ALA could fall back on the neutral and uniquely American concept of intellectual freedom. In 1967, the ALA established the Office for Intellectual Freedom, headed by Jewish leftist Judith Krug, who would serve as executive director of the office until her death in 2009, after over 5 decades as the public face of the ALA's intellectual freedom activism. From its inception, Krug's Office for Intellectual Freedom would place a clear focus on the sexualization of the American library. Krug would argue that despite there being no public demand for it, pornography should be made available in all public libraries. From its beginnings, the pornography industry in America has been completely dominated by Jews. As Jewish pornographer Al Goldstein would brag, the only reason that Jews are in pornography is that we think Christ sucks. Catholicism sucks. We don't believe in authoritarianism. In an article for the Jewish Quarterly, Jewish professor Nathan Abrams writes that Jewish involvement in porn is a result of an atavistic hatred of Christian authority. They are trying to weaken the dominant culture in America by moral subversion. Pornography thus becomes a way of defiling Christian culture, and as it penetrates the very heart of the American mainstream, its subversive character becomes more charged. Throughout the early 20th century, Jewish pornographers would wage war on America's obscenity laws, and the 1969 Supreme Court decision in Stanley v. Georgia saw the complete legalization of pornography, removing all legal barriers to the Jewish subversion of Christian morality. In response to the legalization of pornography in 1969, the U.S. Congress funded the President's Commission on Obscenity and Pornography, which had been set up by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Based on the research of a single Danish Jew, Burl Kaczynski, the commission will release a report concluding that pornography was not harmful and was in fact an important psychological release valve to reduce aggression in a sexually repressive society. As Jewish pornography became mainstream in the 60s and 70s, the tip of the spear was Playboy magazine, with its Gentile frontman Hugh Hefner. After being inspired by the release of the Kinsey Reports, Hefner would launch Playboy in 1953, considering himself Kinsey's pamphleteer, spreading the news of sexual liberation through a monthly magazine.
Hello there. Glad you can join us this evening. I'm Hugh Hefner, editor-publisher of Playboy magazine, and your
While the Gentile Hefner would serve as the face of Playboy, the behind-the-scenes operations, as in the entire porn industry, was entirely Jewish. Playboy editor Nat Lehrman would state the whole staff practically was Jewish. We were the dominant, probably the brighter ones. Playboy would find itself in a business partnership with the American Library Association, with Krug's Office for Intellectual Freedom pushing for Playboy to be made available and promoted in all American libraries, and Playboy regularly contributing to the ALA's intellectual freedom activities. But Judith Krug and her co-ethnics at the ALA had a very specific audience in mind with the distribution of Playboy and much more extreme pornography. In the Intellectual Freedom Manual, which is released by Krug's Office for Intellectual Freedom, it instructs libraries on how to be in compliance with the ALA's intellectual freedom policies. Jewish ACLU attorney Robert Peck decries society's sexual taboos as restrictive to the free expression of children and writes, "If there is a societal consensus on any free speech issues, it is that children should not be exposed to sexual content. Those committed to intellectual freedom must be prepared to challenge that rationale." In 1967, the year Judith Krug formed the Office for Intellectual Freedom, the ALA moved to amend the 1939 Library Bill of Rights to include prohibition of age discrimination, making it official library policy that children of any age must have full, unrestricted access to all adult materials, a move that Krug brags was well in advance of public opinion. Krug would hold the ALA to a very strict interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights, that libraries must provide children full access to any material they requested, regardless of the objections of parents, a policy that would also extend to school libraries. Rejecting the idea that children are more susceptible to being influenced, even damaged by objectionable materials than are adults, the official interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights makes no distinction between materials and services for children and adults, while identifying the particular need for sexually explicit materials to be kept available in public libraries. In 1972, Judith Krug and the Intellectual Freedom Committee would release a revised version of the 1953 Freedom to Read Statement, with one major omission: the statement that the present laws dealing with obscenity should be vigorously enforced. The 1972 version of the statement would reflect the new ALA's radical commitment to its social responsibility of peddling pornography to children, regardless of the existing laws, and will be officially endorsed by many other powerful institutions, including the ACLU, the ADL, and CICUS. As it is explicitly stated in the Intellectual Freedom Manual, any library which limits children's borrowing of materials from the adult collection, including videotapes or other audiovisual materials, is engaging in a form of censorship and violates professional standards. And what counts as a violation of standards to the American Library Association? Applying MPAA ratings or any other label that could suggest the age appropriateness of a library material is unacceptable. Altering or editing material in any way is a serious violation. And even attempting to limit obscene material to adults-only sections of the library is also considered a violation of the Library Bill of Rights. Any library found to be in violation of these extreme interpretations of the Library Bill of Rights would be subject to sanctions, professional boycott, and even legal action by the ALA. Krug would say of Madonna's 1992 Sex book, "This book is sleazy trash, but it should be in every medium-sized library in the United States." While the American Library Association didn't hesitate to generate controversy by openly peddling pornography to children, the ALA's radical commitment to intellectual freedom did have its limits, namely criticism of Israel. In the early 1990s, the International Human Rights Task Force of the Social Responsibilities Roundtable, headed by Gentile David Williams, would draft a series of resolutions criticizing Israeli censorship of Palestinians in the occupied territories, and calling on Israel to abide by universally recognized norms of intellectual freedom and human rights. Any further investigation by the ALA into Israeli censorship and violations of Palestinian intellectual freedom was actively opposed and obstructed by Judith Krug and her so-called Office for Intellectual Freedom. Since the 1970s, the ALA had not hesitated to boycott South Africa over its racial policies. But the ALA leadership would remove all criticism of Israel from the 1992 resolution. The term occupied territories was considered Israel bashing and was excluded. And the resolution ended up as a blanket condemnation of censorship in the entire Middle East, without any specific mention of Israel. For his consistent and principled stand against Israeli censorship, Williams would be accused of anti-Semitism and having an obnoxious style. Despite resistance from ALA leadership, the SRRT approved the creation of a task force on Israeli censorship in Palestinian libraries in 1993, also chaired by Williams. In response, the Anti-Defamation League and other Jewish organizations would pressure the ALA into revoking the resolutions on Israel, and almost succeeded in abolishing SRRT altogether. In order to save itself, the SRRT moved in 1994 to officially censure David Williams, strip him from all his positions, and banned him from holding any SRRT office for 3 years. The Task Force on Israeli Censorship in Palestinian Libraries was officially disbanded later that year. It seems Williams found out the hard way that despite the empty rhetoric of intellectual freedom, Gentiles are simply not allowed to criticize Israel, and that the concept of human rights does not extend to victims of Jewish aggression and genocide.
Millions of Americans own a personal computer. If you're one of them, you can now glimpse the future with nothing more than a modem, a phone line, and a few dollars a month.
With the rise of the internet in the 90s, the proliferation of hardcore pornography online became a matter of public concern.
Today, the Supreme Court decision against the Communications Decency Act marked a departure from precedent on indecency and weakens the protection of our children by our laws. The court recognizes that the Congress has a compelling interest in protecting the physical and psychological well-being of children on telephones, on radio, on television, on bookstores, in video shops, but not on the internet.
This year has been an absolutely fascinating year because we got involved, we're not only involved with books and videos and magazines and CD-ROMs, but the internet is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And it's becoming a very exciting issue. So we are at the beginning of the most important revolution in terms of communication that we've experienced since the invention of the printing press.
Library computer terminals became key access points for those seeking out online pornography, which was often left open and accessible to children. In response to the rise of online pornography, some libraries began installing internet filters on the library computers, causing a conflict with the ALA.
Most of them blocked at the highest level, which meant that 50% of the health sites were blocked, and only, from 89%, only 94% of the explicit sexual material sites or explicit sites were blocked. So the truth is that you are eliminating vast amounts of exactly the kind of health information that young people need in today's world to protect not you or you, but to protect themselves. I consider this to be a very serious
I don't know what
issue.
library policy is, but what the study found...
According to Judith Krug's Office for Intellectual Freedom, any restriction of internet access was a violation of the Library Bill of Rights, and therefore any library installing internet filters was violating ALA policy.
I'm a psychotherapist, and for the last 15 years I've been specializing in the treatment of sexual violence victims and perpetrators. I treat pedophiles and incest survivors, rapists and rape victims, sexual harassers and sexual harassment victims, and sex addicts. I've seen a tremendous increase in these kinds of problems, especially in the last 5 years. Increasingly, there has been an internet involvement in the kinds of problems that I treat. Allow me to explain. While the many kinds of sexual pathologies that I treat have many differences, there's one factor that these pathologies have in common: permission-giving beliefs. These are shared, distorted beliefs that include beliefs such as sexually pathological behavior is normal, is common, hurts no one, and is socially acceptable. Women and children's bodies are for male entertainment, sex is not about intimacy, and sex is the basis of self-esteem. The internet is an ideal medium for the spread of sexual permission-giving beliefs. Perpetrators now know that children like to have sex with adults. They know it's true because they have seen it. Perpetrators show these images to children to break down the inhibitions of children. Children now know that children like to have sex with adults. They know it's true because they have seen it. For both the predator and the child, these images produce permission-giving beliefs. Now these images are readily available and privately available to anyone who has access to a computer, and we are seeing a massive increase in the sexual acting out in everyone from including the head of the Harvard Theological Seminary to an executive at InfoSeek to children at the public library. And what is happening at our public libraries is a national scandal. Now, pedophiles can go into the libraries to gather pictures for free. Pedophiles ask themselves and tell me, their therapist, how bad can this behavior be if you can do it at the library? The American Library Association has taken the position that everyone has the right to pornography. Even children have the right to pornography, according to the ALA. In fact, in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, adults raised concern about children who were accessing pornography on a public library computer. The ALA responded by fixing the problem. They turned the computer monitors to the wall so that the adults could not see what the children were accessing in the library. For children whose parents who have installed software filters on their home computers, the ALA website links to step-by-step instructions for teens on how to disable that home software. Libraries have become the new red light district. I never thought I would see the day in which I have had to tell my own children and my patients that they must avoid the library.
Taken together, these provisions create a new definition of child pornography that is so broad that it will exert a chilling effect on an array of constitutionally protected material.
By the year 2000, the issue of internet pornography became such a concern that Congress passed the Children's Internet Protection Act, which will require all schools and libraries receiving federal funds to install internet filters on their computers. The American Library Association would challenge the law in court, resulting in a 2003 U.S. Supreme Court decision ruling against the ALA and upholding the constitutionality of the law.
We have the whole Children's Internet Protection Act.
Still.
Oh, yeah.
That goes on and on.
Well, the American Library Association took this all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we lost. I mean, it's as simple as that. We lost. And we can't govern ourselves unless we have the information on which to base our decisions. That's the problem with SEPA, that we are removing information not only from people who aren't going to go to the librarian for whatever reason, because they consider it to be a stigma, because they're afraid, because SEPA focuses on the disenfranchised. It focuses on the people who aren't going to go to the librarian and say, I have to be able to access information on the computer without a filter. Who are they? They are the immigrants. They are the elderly. They are the poor. They are the poorly educated. And the group that I'm most concerned about are the youth of America, who have traditionally gone to libraries to get the information they need and want because they can't get it anywhere else, and they know we're going to keep it private and confidential.
But with the dawn of the 21st century came the rise of the personal computer and eventually the smartphone, making libraries less relevant in the flow of sexual content to children. Along with other powerful Jewish media institutions, the Jewish pornography industry was now capable of beaming their subversive filth directly into the developing minds of American youth through personal devices, easily bypassing all parental authority. In a 2021 article from the American Psychological Association, promoting the porn literacy program of Jewish social scientist Emily Rothman,
I'm a trained social scientist.
The author cites a 2005 study which found that 15% of all 9 to 17-year-olds reported seeking out pornography, while 25% reported an unwanted exposure to pornography in the past year. By 2016, 1/3 of teen respondents reported being 12 or younger when they first saw porn. By the following year, even sex-positive porn literacy educators were presenting a far more shocking set of statistics.
The average age of exposure to pornography is 8 to 11 years old. Of the 8 to 16-year-olds who have viewed online porn did so while doing homework, 90% of them. Okay, and then the percentage of youth that will be exposed to hardcore porn online, also 90%.
In its discussion of teenage porn consumption, the APA article also celebrates pornography giant Pornhub, well known for profiting off of videos of child sexual abuse, for providing sex education to teens through its Pornhub Sexual Wellness Center, which can be found at the bottom of Pornhub's homepage, buried underneath a vast array of the most unnatural and depraved sexual acts known to humanity. But with Pornhub's owner, criminal defense lawyer and ordained rabbi Solomon Friedman, vowing to make the world's largest porn site a force for good, we can be sure America's youth is in good hands.
Days before you guys acquired them, there's this huge Netflix piece about exposing the child pornography issues, all the legal content that's on Pornhub. So were they like, just take this, get rid of it? Or what was the attitude like?
Not even close. So I'll say this, there's no question that, and this has been, discussed in outstanding litigation. And I'm happy to chat about that to the degree that I can. The platform is safe and secure. It's in fact has the most robust trust and safety of any online or even mainstream social platform. We'll talk about that. I'm delighted to talk about that. But it's also it's a really proud place to be because we believe in the work that the platform is doing. We believe in surfacing content that showcases diverse sexual expression, that give people a place, a platform to express themselves in ways they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And it gives people a place to consume that content and interact with that content. What you're trying to do is create a platform where individuals can share in sex-positive expression. It's not about judging choices. It's not about judging taste. Once you are within the confines of this is lawful, we're talking about consenting adults sharing those sexual expression, that experience. It's providing them a platform to do that safely and legally.
With the meteoric rise of Jewish power in the 20th century, the Jewish pornographer had gone from outlaw street peddler to major power broker in a society drenched in sexuality. Through their monopolization of all public and private power institutions, Jews had implemented a vast array of policies designed to guide the psychosexual development of children in a way that would mass produce entire generations of tolerant and docile subjects, easily controlled by psychological manipulation. By the 21st century, the sexual morality and decency of the 19th century had been all but eradicated.
The truth is that Jewish heritage, Jewish culture, Jewish values are such an essential part of who we are that it's fair to say that Jewish heritage is American heritage. The Jewish people have contributed greatly to America. No group has had such an outsized influence per capita as all of you standing before you. I believe what affects the movements in America, what affects our attitudes in America, are as much the culture and the arts as anything else. It wasn't anything we legislatively did. It was will and grace. It was the social media. That's what changed people's attitudes. That's why I was so certain that the vast majority of people would embrace and rapidly embrace gay marriage. To think behind of all that, I bet you 85% of those changes, whether it's in Hollywood or social media, are a consequence of Jewish leaders in the industry. The influence is immense. The influence is immense. And I might add, it is all to the good.
In this new information age of unlimited potential for social engineering, what was next for Jewish America's child sexualization policy?